Hello and welcome everybody to another episode post Memorial Day of Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard coming to you here from North Jersey after the Giants' fifth OTA practice where I watched every snap, every punt return, every reception, and every defensive play. Watched Drew Lock run the first team offense again. Watched Daniel Jones rehab on the side, looking fresh, I might add, number 8 out there looking like he's on or ahead of schedule from that torn ACL. And before we get into the questions and into another fun episode of talking about your favorite team, the New York Giants, and our favorite sport and our favorite league in the NFL, maybe you're tuning in as you watch the Rangers play in the Eastern Conference Finals. Maybe you have made us appointment viewing during the offseason for your favorite Giants team. Maybe you're checking in from an event. Maybe you're at the Rangers game or at a sporting event or at a kids' baseball game late at night under the lights and watching on your phone. However you're tuning in, we appreciate it. But I wanted to start by talking about the quarterback position because I look at Daniel Jones today here on Thursday, May 30th, and I look at a player who is not far away from 11 on 11 snaps. Now, he's 6.5 months out from surgery with a torn ACL in his right knee. And as Drew Lock runs the first team, Daniel Jones is now planting strongly on that right leg as he works on the side with strength and conditioning coach Aaron Wellman. He was planning and rolling out to his left, throwing to Isaiah McKenzie, the wide receiver that they picked up as a free agent this offseason. He was driving the ball down the field to his right. He was running 7-on-7 snaps. Now, seeing that is encouraging because Drew Lock even spoke to us during an engaging and entertaining media session. And Drew Lock, as much as he's excited about all of the spring snaps that he is receiving and the opportunity that he has here that he did not have in places like Seattle a year ago, Drew Lock still recognizes and is accepting of the fact that he is the backup to Daniel Jones. That's in his words. Now, this is all under the guise of a fascinating development in the Giants offseason here in 2024. And that is the fact that Brian Daboll has altered the way he is preparing his team for an NFL season. We will see when we get to training camp if veterans are receiving off days left and right, if the snaps are dialed back so much that it looks like the team isn't ready to play a football game in week 1 like they were a year ago. But most definitely and very clearly, Brian Daboll, the Giants head coach, understands that if he does not ramp up his team in a more critical and urgent fashion, that it's now or never for him, and it's not going to develop into the type of program and the type of team he wants it to be. So here are the steps he has taken. Number 1, the Giants are playing a lot of 11-on-11 snaps during OTAs, which is something that they did not go heavy on and do much of any of in 2023. Now, that was something that from the get-go a year ago was concerning. And they're not allowed to play live football yet. Brian Daboll is not allowed to have the pads on these guys. The defense isn't allowed to hit. So in that regard, there's only a certain amount that you can do as a coach and as a program to get your team ready. But we're talking about the first team offense coming onto the field, let's say for 5 different, versions of series. They ran a short yardage drill for all 3 first, second, and third team offense and defense today. Even though they're not hitting live, they were running short yardage and drills backed up against their own goal line on offense. And there is a pass rush that, even though the defensive line isn't pushing the pocket and they're not going full go, they're expecting the offensive linemen to work on their hand placement as they were during this practice, according to John Michael Schmitz, the center. And they're working Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau on the edges. And you can tell that there are real battles happening as much as they can at this point in camp and this point in the spring between offenses and defensive linemen. Now, Brian Daboll said that he thinks it's good for the quarterbacks to see a pass rush when they're operating the offense and when they throw. Obviously, This is long overdue. Daboll said that last year they didn't do 11 on 11 because their numbers were down on the defensive line. But this is about much more than that. This is not about numbers on the defensive line, because when we were here for OTA number 3 a week ago, the Giants were missing a ton of interior defensive linemen, and they ran plenty of 11 on 11 snaps just fine. This isn't about numbers on the offensive and defensive line and players that they have in place, and that's why they can run 11 on 11. This is Brian Daboll and the Giants understanding that it's now or never, that it's time for them to hit the ground running, that they don't have the luxury of starting slow this season. And this is a sign that Brian Daboll knows that this is the year, and it has to be the year, or he might not be the coach next season. Darius Slayton brought a refreshing perspective to it as well, saying as he returns to practice with some incentives added to his deal that, he's excited to be back. And yes, he wanted some recognition in his contract of what he's done. But Darius Slayton didn't want to talk about anything other than, listen, guys, we've been losing too much here. We have to start winning again. Slayton has been the Daniel Jones Stan account, essentially, since he got here, coming in here in the same draft class in 2019. He's always the first one to defend Daniel Jones and the strongest voice defending Daniel Jones. And when I asked Darius Slayton what Daniel can do to shut up the critics and to earn the respect of the fans and the rest of the league, he said, win. We all have to win. If we lose, everybody thinks we stink. If we win, people stop criticizing us. There's less noise. But the fact of the matter is, he said, we've been losing too much and we need to get back on track as a team. And that brings me to the final point, which is something that is getting louder, on these Twitter streets, but it's something that we've been telling you here at Talkin Ball about for a while. And that is that Brian Daboll is the play caller, right? He is expected to call the plays this season. And during these practices that we've seen, every single practice we have seen so far, including rookie minicamp and OTAs now, Brian Daboll has been the one calling the plays in the huddle, literally walking up to the huddle and calling the plays to the quarterbacks. And so if you combine Brian Daboll as play caller with 11 on 11 snaps, significant 11 on 11 full team snaps in practices, something they didn't do a year ago, combine that with Darius Slayton, one of the most senior players on the team, coming back in, and his primary message being that he's tired of losing and it's time to start winning. It all adds up to the Giants at least understanding the amount of urgency that needs to go in to this season, and that it's not about September as much as it's about right now, May, June, July, and August, because that is when Brian Daboll is going to set a good tone. It's when he can set a new tone, and it's when he can accept the shortcomings of his program. And that goes all the way up to Joe Shane, to Ronnie Barnes and the training staff, and to how they plan things, right? And this is about an organization that hopefully, based on these signs, has taken a hard look in the mirror and is now getting itself to a place where it can prepare the team to hit the ground running in week one instead of shaking their heads at what could have been. And with that, we're going to get into your questions. Remember, you can purchase a super chat or a super sticker that'll elevate you to the top of the chat. Have your question or comment addressed and answered first. If not, we'll get all through the queue as we always do. And we will share whatever insight that I have from watching practice, talking to some of the offensive assistant coaches today at practice, which we had an opportunity to do. That's all the position coaches, and get some insight into the roster, the depth chart, and whatever players and developments you want to hear about. So Tuto kicks us off with a super sticker. Tuto Azuri, always one of our most supportive and present listeners and viewers. Thank you so much, Tuto. He says massive salutes and respect to Big Boss Pat, my bro Tommy, and all diehard Giants fans across the pond. Greetings from me and my fam here in Princeton, Jersey. Greetings in Princeton, Tuto. Thank you so much for kicking us off. Joel says, what's up, Pat? What wide receiver do you think is the odd man out after camp closes out? So, Joel, I think, to answer that question, well, first of all, one development in practice that we saw, Gunnar Olszewski, unfortunately, the team's primary returner down the stretch of last season, at least on punts, was profiling as the top returner for this coming season. Hurt his left either ankle or foot, it looked like, in practice today, running a route on air, which means, no defenders, just running a route. He slipped, ended up limping inside after kind of struggling to get up off the ground. So hopefully he's okay. Obviously, that's one wide receiver who factors into the mix. Now, at the receiver position, I think obviously Malik Neighbors, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Darius Slayton. That's 4 right off the bat who are on the roster and on your team. A guy who has looked intriguing to me is Bryce Ford Wheaton. Now, obviously, he's coming off the injury from last year. And last year, he was profiling more like a gunner on special teams who was hopefully going to earn snaps as the season went, right? So we'll see how that develops for Bryce. But I like what I see from him so far. And I'm hoping that as we get closer to training camp, he's a big-bodied receiver who can really run and move. Looks the part out there on the field. I'm intrigued to see more of what he can do and what he can show. Isaiah Hodgins obviously is in the mix. Miles Boykin, I think. Now, I don't know if you want to count him, Joel, but I believe as we stand here right now, if the season started today, I think Nick McLeod and Miles Boykin would be the Giants' 2 starting gunners on punt coverage. So that's another wide receiver to factor into the mix. So I guess the guys I just mentioned are the ones who have stood out to me so far. And so, who does that put on the outs? Let's see. Well, there's John Giles, Chase Cota. Gunner, of course, that's an interesting one because who else is going to step up as a punt returner if he's not your guy? Dennis Houston, who was on the side. Maybe Isaiah McKenzie, could end up being an odd man out there, but that could depend on Gunner. I do think they're going to end up keeping more wide receivers again, and obviously you have room to stash some guys on the practice squad. So I think if a guy's not on the active roster, I still think there's a chance that he ends up, on the practice squad. It's not like some of those those depth guys are, they're not necessarily people who are going to get claimed off of waivers. Ryan checks in with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Ryan, so much. Good to see you. He says, Pat, back on Darius Slayton, what was your initial reaction to his response regarding your Daniel Jones question? Does body language tell us anything? I think, and I just heard some shouting in the background of my house, I think the Rangers might have just scored, which we are monitoring here, but Talkin Ball Live is important, right? So if I'm missing a Ranger game, it's important. There it is. Rick says goal. So Ryan, back to your question, and thanks again for the super chat here. Darius is a big fan of Daniel. I am sure that he has opinions on how the organization maybe handled this offseason surrounding Daniel, which we probably should have gotten to in this interview, and we did not. I did manage to ask him just about Daniel as a whole. I think what I viewed that answer to be, Ryan, was not any kind of shot at Daniel. I viewed it more as fatigue over losing, and Darius kind of saying, like his answer was 2 years ago when the team won and went to the playoffs, everybody was talking about how Daniel looks good. He just needs more help. And he said, now last year the team loses and everybody thinks Daniel's not good enough again. So his point was, the fact of the matter is that Daniel Jones's Q rating, let's say, or his popularity among fans and whether he is supported really is just a brass tacks business. And I think this is a young team where we don't see, there's a shortage of guys on this team who can speak like Slayton can about the team's fortunes and about their intentions and about the kind of the pressure that's on them. Right. And I think what Darius was saying throughout his interview, including during this Daniel Jones answer, like even when he was asked about like he was asked about free agency next year and the fact that, hey, you could actually maybe cash in next year. And his point was, well, you know, I'm not even there yet because we have to play well because we have to win games. So if we don't win games, none of that matters, right? That was what he was saying. So I guess I hope that answers your question, Ryan. I think that Darius, like, remember Saquon last year, how he was being diplomatic, but was tired of losing, right? Was tired of losing. It becomes you know, it wears on you as a veteran, as a player who's been in here answering the same questions, talking on behalf of the team, when you know that there's certain um, inherent shortcomings to maybe the way the roster is constructed or the way the team's built. So that's what I review and read into that. Tommy says it's a bunch of talent we have going into camp. Should be a way more competitive practice going into the season. We'll see. I mean, they definitely have added some talent at spots. At other spots, I think they're still lacking, which we'll probably see once they start competing against, other teams. But Tommy, one area that concerns me is running back. Now, Gary Brightwell was released waived injured today. They signed a special teams defensive back in his place, who came from the Pittsburgh Steelers, a free agent. So with Gary Brightwell not here anymore, the Giants running back room right now is Devin Singletary, Eric Gray, Ja'Shawn Corbin, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and the kid from South Carolina, Dante Miller. Now, that is just not a sufficient running back room for an NFL team. And there's some talent there, obviously. These are, like Corbin's a guy who has been waiting for his chance. Gray's only a second-year player. Singletary was a free agent they were excited about signing, right? Tracy, an intriguing rookie. Miller, a guy who has some juice. But, going from Saquon Barkley to this really is something that, in my mind, is concerning from the standpoint of trying to force defenses to pay attention to your run game and take pressure off your quarterback. Now, I do think it probably screams for some sort of addition there, especially like a heavier downhill runner with Brightwell no longer here. So we'll see where that goes as far as like a bargain signing in that sense. So that's something to watch out for. I did, Tommy, talk to Joel Thomas today, the Giants running backs coach who spent a long time in New Orleans. We were talking a little bit about Alvin Kamara, about working with a guy like Tyrone Tracy with a, kind of a multiple skill set, and what he can bring to the room. I can tell you, Thomas, very interesting guy. I like his patience with the running back room, as far as like his message to me was, right now, he doesn't want to pigeonhole anyone into a specific role. What he's doing right now is giving guys opportunities to do everything, to learn what they're comfortable with, to learn what they do better, to see their strengths and weaknesses, to see their best fits, to teach them the offense, especially with a lot of young players. So that could explain why Eric Gray, for example, received so many first team reps in this specific OTA practice number 5, while Singletary did get first team reps, but Gray got more. Of course, Singletary would be above him on the depth chart, but definitely ways to work guys in. But he was saying that he's been showing them film of past running backs, veteran running backs, not to put pressure on them. Like if he shows them a clip of Alvin Kamara, he's not saying you need to be Alvin Kamara, but he's showing them concepts and skill sets within the structure of an offense that they can use and that they can employ, and maybe how the player got there, teaching them that way. He told me that he was showing them clips of Tim Hightower, and he said, actually, it was really funny. Like the guys really didn't know Tim Hightower when he's sitting there talking about Tim Hightower in the room, but he's showing them clips of the former running back because he said Tim Hightower, his timing on outside zone runs was always perfect. Like he always just had the timing down exceptionally well on how to hit the holes, on how to run outside zone. And so that was one example of a clip that he's been showing the players in his room, and kind of tried to take it to the practice field each day. So very interesting conversation there, but I'm concerned about that room. They need more talent there. Good evening, Hunter. Good to see you. He says, great to see Darius Slayton back. Tommy says they gave Slayton more money in incentives. Hunter says, any idea what those incentives are? Tommy says something like $650K if he gets 1,000 yards over 70 receptions. So Tommy, he already had $1.5 million in incentives in his contract with that related to certain numbers like that. But now this is another $650,000 in incentives added to that. So now his incentives in his contract are 2.15 million. We don't know the specifics yet of what those incentives are. But what was strange about this, Tommy and Hunter and everybody, is that Darius indicated that he wasn't even sure if he's able to recoup the $350,000 workout bonus for the offseason that's in his contract, but technically, by the letter of the law, would be forfeited because he has not participated in 100% of the offseason program. But that can be excused by the head coach or the GM or the head athletic trainer. So there's a chance that the Giants will still give him the $350K workout bonus plus the incentives, right? But if he's going to lose the $350K in the workout bonus for that, if you want to call it a partial holdout, only to get incentive money that is unlikely to be earned or difficult to earn, that would seem like a very strange way to go about doing business from the player agent side of things. So really doesn't add up to Slayton achieving what he wanted on the contract side. But in the long run, clearly a guy who just feels like it's time for the Giants to win, and he didn't want to miss any more time in that regard. But I feel bad for Slayton a little bit, him walking back in, only getting that, because I think he deserves more. Savage Steve, he says, what's up, Pat? What are we drinking tonight? And has anything stood out? I get the feeling Waller is definitely retiring. Only water right now, Steve. Just played some basketball, so got a good sweat in. And I have to admit, I intended to have a cocktail this evening, but once I got the good workout in, needed to hydrate. So no bourbon or wine in my hand right now. But if I end up watching the third period after Talkin Ball live here, then I'll probably pour myself something. As far as what stood out to me, in addition to what we've talked about here so far on Talkin Ball Live, I would say that coming out of this specific practice, I was a bit concerned after Gunnar Olszewski went out and they went to the punt return part of practice. And really, it was just guys fielding punts with the jugs machine and then, kind of simulating the early part of a return. But really, they were just trying to get them set up in fielding punts, making smart decisions and catch and run early on. And then they sent gunners towards them later in the session. And very few guys, if any, looked comfortable catching the punts. The only guy who looked semi-comfortable with it was Wan'Dale Robinson, but he's also somebody that is featured heavily in their offense. So it's hard to imagine that they're going to have him back there as well. He also had a bad misjudgment on one when the gunners were coming after him later in that period. Good example too would be like Ayir Asante is a wide receiver who has stood out to me so far, but then they put him back on punts today and he kind of looked lost back there. I know he's a rookie, so not going to be too hard on him. But just no one else really stood out there. I was a little bit concerned about that. On the positive side and on kind of the interesting side, Savage Steve, of what stood out, the offensive line depth chart for this practice. Andrew Thomas did do 11 on 11. Brian Daboll said that his early absence in OTAs was not injury related, but it's confusing then like why he just wasn't doing 11 on 11 the week before. I'm not really sure. But the alignment today, first team O-line, was Andrew Thomas left tackle, Jermaine Illuminor was still at left guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, John Runyon Jr. at right guard, and Josh Azudu was at right tackle instead of being at left tackle the previous time. Evan Neal and Matt Nelson, the tackles, working on the side during those team periods. The second team offensive line was Josh Azudu at left tackle, Jake Kubas at left guard, Jimmy Morrissey actually was at center, and Austin Schlottman was at center with the third group. Aaron Stinney at right guard, and Yadni Kajust at right tackle. And then the third team offensive line was Josh Miles at left tackle, Marcus McKeithen at left guard, Austin Schlottman at center. And then at right guard, we had Jalen Mayfield, and right tackle was Marcellus Johnson. So that was the lineup at offensive line in a position group that obviously needs to stand out. Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, was not, it was not revealing about too much in discussing the offensive line and what their plans are. He did indicate that there are some different things they're asking them to do. And in conjunction with Brian Daboll and Carmen Brasillo talking about how the offense is going to operate. He mentioned there were some different things they were going to ask Andrew Thomas to do without going into details. Not sure if you want to tinker with that too much, but there are adjustments happening there. Hunter says, media some clowns. That was definitely a Kadarius Toney reference, which we appreciate as always. Evan says, enjoy the live streams. Don't really comment much. Evan, you don't need to comment if you don't want to. If you'd like to, that's great. If you just want to sit back and listen and watch, love that as well. Thanks so much for being here. I do need to tell you guys about our sponsor, Bet Online, which, I got carried away, so excited about all these insights we're talking about with the Giants. I forgot to lay it out there. So let me just tell you about Bet Online. It's your number one source for the NBA and NHL playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get on the action. Don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Also by Estate 98 Coffee. It's an Esencia Day Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. I drink it all the time when I'm doing the Talkin Ball podcast and Talkin Ball live if we're not at night right now. That's when I don't necessarily need the caffeine. Also, Future Fans Football right here. Good Father's Day gift. A fun interactive way to teach your kids the game. Futurefans.com. Check them out as well. But I appreciate all you guys being here. Hunter says he's watching the Mavs game and us at the same time. Luka is killing the Wolves. Tommy says Drew Lock knows he's a backup for sure. Hunter said, how did Tommy DeVito look so far? Tommy DeVito looked better in the first OTA practice we saw. In this OTA practice, Tommy DeVito did not look good. He bounced a couple. He overthrew a couple receivers, and he held the ball too long on some others. Looked closer to the quarterback we saw last year. Nathan Rourke kind of stood out a little bit in this practice, was just delivering the ball quicker. Like compared to DeVito in this practice, Nathan Rourke was just getting rid of the ball quicker. Has a bit of a gunslinger mentality. He's got some mobility. And Brandon Brown indicated that, they brought him in because they feel like he's a guy who he can run an offense in practice. He's a good guy to have on the 90-man, to have in camp, to work with the team. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on the depth chart, on the quarterback depth chart there. Clearly also he's here because he believed that he was going to get a significant amount of reps at time to show what he can do. So I think he showed what he could do in this practice specifically. One thing that also stood out, going back to Steve asking just kind of a general question of watching practice, Shane Bowen's defense, they're going to play more zone, have that 4-man rush. And the offense today was more focused, and this goes to Drew Lock too, who had a better practice than what we saw a week ago. The offense was taking what it was given in this practice more so than they did prior, and, completing a lot of underneath routes. Now, obviously, sometimes, the offense is working on something specifically versus other things, but, there were downfield routes. Like there was one play, Wan'Dale Robinson got free over top of Cordell Flott, and Drew Lock didn't see him, threw it underneath. But, I think the defense is going to be a defense that, as Jerome Henderson said to us directly, they're going to try to keep the ball in front of them. And, could that lead to a bend but don't break? Possibly. Could the Giants have the type of toughness and the type of pass rush and scheme and play calling that when they get down in the red zone, that works? Sure. But I think we definitely saw in this specific practice, one way that maybe the defense could be attacked which is, catch and run underneath. And really what it's going to come down to is the Giants back end is going to need to tackle well, because they're going to be, it looks like, you know, content at times with like, okay, we'll give you a 6-yard completion and we're going to tackle you for no more than a 7-yard gain. Right. And so that's something I think to keep an eye on as far as how they operate once you start seeing them play in preseason games and in the regular season. You know, how often is that going to work? Is there going to be certain teams they can do that against, certain teams that they can't? I'm sure they're going to mix and match. Bowen does play man as well. But that was something I noticed too. Another thing I'm looking for is Tyler Nubin, the rookie safety, has not been working with the first team. Drew Phillips, every now and then you see him in there with the first team offense at slot. Nick McLeod has been that guy though, primarily, but Nubin has really been, exclusively with the backups, and it didn't feel like he took a ton of snaps to me in this practice. So, second round pick, I think this guy is a number 47 overall pick. He needs to be on the field. What do you think the wide receiver room will look like come week 1? Said Hunter. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that already, but I do think that the top 4 is Neighbors, Wandale, Hyatt, Slayton, and then everybody else is battling underneath. I mean, I think Allen Robinson, the veteran, he's a guy I forgot to mention earlier. That's somebody else to consider who really could end up with a lot of more opportunities stepping to the forefront as far as reliability goes. I also think that I'm very interested in seeing once Daniel Jones comes back into 11 on 11, because you've seen Drew Lock get these snaps with these receivers and he's trying to develop a chemistry and learn the offense. But, you hope that it starts to look a little bit more explosive with Daniel Jones in, under center or in shotgun, because right now what you see is some opportunities for playmaking, and Neighbors can get free, and Hyatt has the speed, and Wandale has the catch and run. And I will say this, Darius Slayton looked like physically he hasn't missed a beat. So whoever he's been working out with and whatever he's been doing, kudos to him, because he came right in today and looked sharp, and Daniel Jones was hitting him right away for a couple of completions in 7-on-7. But I just would like to see, it's very early in the spring, but you just want to see this start to look more explosive. You want to see more confidence built, whether it's Locke, whether it's Daniel Jones coming in, and whether it's even the backup quarterbacks. I just want to see more from the offense as we go. It was funny. Drew Lock said that this is his first offensive coach, and he said he finally had a practice period during OTA number 5 where the offense was with the wind, which he said doesn't happen with defensive coaches, which obviously coming with most recently from Pete Carroll in Seattle. Christian says the Giants have to be competitive against Dallas and Philly, period. Totally agree. If it starts right there. Rick says, how do you explain Joshua Izudu at offensive tackle? There is no true explanation for that right now, Rick. I think Brasillo obviously emphasized that they intend to work guys at different spots and give players opportunities at various spots on the roster as they compete and develop their team. But I do think, Rick, that with some players, it's not necessarily worth beating a dead horse on what we already know doesn't work. You shouldn't force a square peg into a round hole. We'll see where that goes. But in relation to that question, Rick, I did not like Brandon Brown's answer today when he was asked about why they didn't draft an offensive lineman. Okay. So Brandon Brown was asked about the fact that they didn't draft an offensive lineman. And it was just simply, why didn't you come out of this draft with any O-line? And Brown said, when you talk about forecasting and projecting, whether we do that across the board, whether it's in February, going to free agency, going into the draft, you know what the landscape looks like. We knew there were going to be opportunities in free agency to bolster the O-line. You look at adding Runyon and Illuminor, guys that have been healthy, available. There's some familiarity there. Obviously, Brasillo being here, coming from Vegas, having time with Jermaine. where we were in the draft, the positions we took, we felt great about those guys being contributors for us this year. Knowing we addressed certain things via the draft, the way things just lined up for a resource allocation, we're really excited with what we came away with. That is not an answer. That is a non-answer. And it is a disappointing answer for me in the sense that you guys didn't assemble a competent offensive line either on the starters or in the depth for your quarterbacks to have a sustainable chance to run an offense in 2023. That is not an explanation for why you don't need depth on your roster, for why you don't need development on your offensive line. Like, I don't understand why, for them to look at the line, if a Zudu is somebody who's playing significant snaps at tackle in practice, and for their assistant GM to not have a real explanation, we know they signed guards in free agency, but why didn't you draft an offensive lineman? I don't follow it. And like I said, Nubin hasn't been, running with the starters yet. I've just scratched my head at that. I mean, John Michael Schmitz did admit it is encouraging to have two guards looking like they're set, at least at the moment, like consistently. He's playing with the two same guards next to him right now in practice, right? So that's a good thing for the center. So, All right, let's see. Did you see Tyler Nubin just released his own draft day video? Really high production value and worth a look, everyone. Bill, no, I didn't. I'll check that out. I like Tyler a lot from my limited time around him. I think he's an interesting dude and does profile as a leader. That's why I want to see him earn snaps and get on the field. I think he can help them. Ryan says, any rumblings around Steve Smith Sr. sticking around to support wide receiver development? Daboll didn't say that. He just said he's going to be around a little bit. It sounds like he's going to be around for multiple practices. He said he was around last year too. Of course, Steve Smith's in a position where he's got to build kind of back up his reputation a little bit after trashing Jerry Jeudy last year. Was not a good look while working for NFL Network, kind of getting in the spat with the then Broncos, now Browns receiver. But what I do think can help from Steve Smith Sr. perspective, Ryan, is that's a guy who played with some attitude and some edge, right? And Neighbors is constantly talking about how much of a dog he is, how competitive he is. And that's something Brandon Brown said the Giants loved about him too, is that he always wants to be the best player. He wants to play in the biggest spots. He wants to dominate. He wants to embarrass people on the field and make them feel it. And Steve Smith Sr. is definitely that type of player, Ryan. And so, Shane and Daboll both have a relationship with Steve Smith Sr. So it does sound like he's going to be hanging around a little bit. I mean, he was out there on the practice field in, coach's gear, essentially, like in sweats with the Giants visor and all, like legit doing work with the receivers on the side, showing them how to attack routes and stuff. So it's certainly possible. He seemed, like I was the one who noticed him kind of walk out with them as a coaching staff, and it looked different than just a guy being a guest at practice, I guess is the best way I could put it. Tommy says, DeVito looks good for a third string, possibly backup, but Locke nor DeVito are better than Tyrod. Right. Exactly. They're missing Tyrod right now for sure. Let's see. Tommy says Daboll knows Bill Belichick awaits to come back home. Tuto says, Tommy, it's all about smart and competent coaching, mate. He's the one who's creating the holes on the lineups, but if he knows what he's doing, there won't be any holes on the team. G-Men says, Pat, have you seen Darren Waller tanning at the beach and making music videos? Have to assume Shane is going to cut his ass post June 1st to save $11 million. If he does that, could you see a mid-tier splash like a Stephon Gilmore or Xavier Howard? G-Men, I do think that Darren Waller at this point, to me, here's the other thing. And nothing against Darren personally, but just like look at this from an allocation standpoint, resource wise. Why would you want, this is a team that is trying to get its injury numbers back, looking better. It's a team that's trying to keep its players on the field. It's a team that's working to have reliability. Now, you don't want to just get rid of a guy who could be a top weapon and option for you, but can you rely and count on Darren Waller to be that right now? Hard to say that. By the way, I was relieved. Connor Hughes of SNY posted on X that if he got 100 likes on this tweet, that I was going to sing in honor of Darren Waller to open this live chat. And so I'm grateful. I think he had like 70 likes or so, but I'm grateful he didn't have 100. Quite an auto-tune music video there from Darren. G-Man, it's funny. The June 1st date, I mean, you can cut a player before June 1st and still make him a June 1st signing. So I don't know why they would have to wait till that point. Like, you don't technically have to do that. But yes, I agree, G-Man, with your idea of, cutting bait and reallocating your resources. Now, I will say, when you name Stephon Gilmore, Xavier Howard, other, kind of veteran players like that, are they looking to play for the Giants right now? Because usually those are players who are looking to hook on for a team that is going to go deep in the playoffs. Now, of course, sometimes you get a veteran in that situation where they're just as, if not more interested in kind of getting a payday one more time before their career is up too. So, could you get a guy like that or a player like one of those guys, to take 8 million or 9 million or whatever, where they're only going to get 5 somewhere else, to be on a worse team instead of a winner? Yeah, you might be able to score that. I think that would be, you'd have to sell that more than anything to players like that. So hard for me to sit here and say you could land players of that caliber and status, but I definitely agree with, that should be the course of action to reallocate those resources. Tommy says, think of what quarterback would have the confidence to let it rip with these past coaches, play callers, and players on the field. You have no trust to protect you or catch the ball. Yeah, that's fair in plenty of situations. Bo and Brasillo have a better grasp at knowing how to put players in the best position to succeed. Well, I mean, that's no guarantee at all. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. How will the wide receiver look? Yeah, no, we saw that for sure. Definitely talked about the receivers a little bit. Hunter says, how has Allen Robinson looked? Robinson has run with the backups. Definitely has not gotten ample snaps, Hunter. So it's been interesting. Like, Allen Robinson and Jalen Mills are two guys on offense and defense who I feel like I saw them signed and felt like they would be placed into more prominent roles than I so far have seen them in. Right now, we all know that these are guys who are, or have either lost a half a step or a step compared to the players they once were. And so it's not like we expect them to be like star players on offense or defense, but they both have worked with the reserves so far. Let's see. Tuto reinforcing it's all about coaching. All right, let's get to everybody else. Brett says, well, I know what I'm doing tonight. Thanks, Pat. You got it, Brett. Thanks for being here, man, as always. Let's see. Chronicles, what's going on? Good to see you. Chris P says, personally, I'm more excited about the pass rush outside linebacker room going into the season than I've been in a while. How have they looked during OTAs? Chris, that is the most exciting part of this roster right now, along with Malik Neighbors' presence and potential. They are very much they're the unit that has dominated in practices that we've seen. Like today, I walk out on the field, and the first 3 plays were, let's see, Drew Lock throwing off target to Chris Manhertz, then a Brian Burns sack, and then a Kayvon Thibodeau sack. So those were the first 3 plays right off the bat. Then we went Drew Lock to Wan'Dale Robinson on a really nice throw and play and good protection. Then we had Drew Lock throwing low and incomplete to Tyrone Tracy in the flat, another incompletion, and then a completion to Bryce Ford Wheaton. Then in the third period for the first team offense, we had Drew Lock hitting Darius Slayton twice, going deep incomplete to Jalen Hyatt, throwing incomplete to an open Darius Slayton, and then another sack. Darnay Holmes, by the way, did have a forced turnover today. Couldn't see it because I was blocked by some of the Giants offensive linemen standing in front of me for that particular play where the ball ended up. I wasn't sure whether it was an interception that he had with the reserves or whether it was a fumble he ripped out. But Darnay Holmes did make a nice play. But Chris, Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau really have been impressive. And of course, it was worse and more dominant when Andrew Thomas wasn't on the field last practice. But for example, Chris, there was one play where they sent two tight ends outside to take care of Brian Burns coming off the right edge on one play call today, and that was not going to work. Right? You need to get a tackle involved in that. Let's see. Chronicles says that he doesn't think the Giants have a bad backfield. You have a consistent starter in Singletary who has proven he's a starter in the league. They got Malik Neighbors to get the start, not a running back, and Eric Gray can move. Albert says running back by committee. We finished with a lousy record with Saquon Barkley. Singletary is fine. We'll have to hope so. Tommy says Singletary is healthy and dependable. Tracy will be productive player, definitely. Well, we don't know that, Tommy. He's a rookie. It's hard to expect to count on rookies to be a certain thing. Corbin Gray just won't get it done. Rather see Miller. Plus, Dable will not run the ball much. We have more pass block O-line. That part, I think, is true. DB and interior defensive line, I'm concerned with, says Albert. Yeah, interior defensive line remains a concern. A lot of rotations today. Nacho was in there. Ryder Anderson was in there. Haven't seen Jordan Phillips now for 2 straight open OTA practices. Brian Dable did say that everyone except for Darren Waller has been there for at least one day in the spring. So that indicates seemingly that Jordan Phillips has been there at least one day, but we haven't seen him on the field. Tommy says, everyone, please subscribe and hit the like button always. Thank you, Tommy. Thanks for saying that. Slayton deserves the money. He has gotten $750 a year with the worst O-line and wide receivers and so-called worst QB. Rick says Slayton's cap hit was reduced today by $400,000 per Aaron Wilson. Interesting. H5000 says of the running back room, we replaced Saquon with a chump like Singletary, a home run hitter for a singles hitter. Even with the addition of Neighbors, until proven otherwise, the Giants will face stacked boxes. Your opinion? Well, actually, H5000, I don't think there's necessarily a need to stack the box right now against the Giants run game. Like, I think, what Saquon did was force opposing defenses to key on him. And so, there were more opportunities for one-on-one coverage outside and on the outside and down the field because the opposing defenses had to factor in that Saquon was there in the backfield. Singletary is a good player. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, I know Singletary is a good player. I like Singletary as a player. Like, I think he is an undervalued guy. I do think he's a good player, but they do not have a running back on this roster that, if Malik Neighbors is the type of receiver that we think he can be, he is not the type of receiver that, they do not have a running back who is going to deter teams from doubling Malik Neighbors, for example. That is the type of thing that I'm concerned about looking at their running back room. Hunter says Slayton sounds like a great guy, a guy you absolutely love to have in the locker room. And selfishly for the media, that would have been a disaster to lose Darius Slayton from the Giants locker room because he's somebody who provides a lot of good perspective and he's honest. And by the way, I just want to say, Drew Lock, I really appreciate Drew Lock and how honest and forthright he was with us during his media session at the podium after this 5th OTA practice. He's just a fantastic quote. He's engaging. He's respectful. He's honest. He's open. It was really, really fun to talk to him and just to listen to him when you weren't the one answering the question or asking the questions. And frankly, credit where credit's due. The Giants today, the Giants PR staff, they brought out Darius Slayton, Drew Lock, Dexter Lawrence, and John Michael Schmitz. And we also got the offensive assistants, Brian Dable and Brandon Brown, all in one day. So that's for our OTA number 5. Grateful to the Giants PR department and good work by them doing that. Let's see. Tommy wants to know if there's anything from the O-line: Johnson, Kubas, Altman Bell, Giles, Rogers, Ovi, and the D-back Johnson. I will say, Tommy, you're asking about like the UDFAs. So I do have an update there on here. Okay, so Alex Johnson, the rookie corner from UCLA, he was working with the second team defense at outside corner. So the starting corners were Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott on the outside, and Nick McLeod on the inside. Drew Phillips working a little bit in on the inside, but more second team. But the outside corners with the second team were Alex Johnson and Tyree Phillips. Or not Tyree Phillips. What am I talking about? Trey Hawkins. I don't know why I said that. So Trey Hawkins and Alex Johnson were the second team corners. So definitely earning some more reps there, Alex Johnson. So that's good to see. And we'll see how that goes. Ryan wants to know the wide receiver depth chart. We talked about the wide receivers, but Ryan, what I would say is that it goes Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson are your top 4 there. Obviously, Wan'Dale's a slot. I do think Neighbors is going to be a guy who works both inside and outside for sure, which is not something that Brian Dable does a lot. Like usually you would see him at practices like the slot receivers running as the slot receivers, the outside receivers run as the outside receivers, and that's what you see in the games. I think Neighbors may create more flex there, which would be a good thing. I think it's those 4 and everybody else. Hodgins works his way in sometimes. But it'd be interesting to see because it's good to have a big bodied receiver like Hodgins who especially, catches the ball well and can be a red zone target. But also the way Dable likes to run things, he likes to run with speed. He likes to push the ball down the field. Bryce Ford Wheaton's a guy to continue to watch. I've liked what I've seen from him. I've seen him make at least one impressive catch in every practice I've seen him in so far. I think that's a guy that if you're a Giants fan, he's like a name who's not a factor yet on the projections of how this team's going to go, where like it would be nice to see him continue to grow and move his name into the ranks and earn reps where he can show like in live drills, 11 on 11. If we can, I would love to see him get to the point where he can run with the first team offense in training camp and show us maybe with that type of size and speed that he could add another dimension to the offense. Thank you, Tommy, for congratulations on the Bet Online sponsorships. Appreciate you. Grateful for that. Okay. The Panthers had tied it up. I didn't see that. Justin says, appreciate your great coverage as always, Pat. Thank you, Justin. What are you seeing and hearing as far as Evan Neal's improvement and what his role could be this season? Justin, Evan Neal continues to, like he does early work with the offensive line in practice, and then he goes on the side and works with the trainers or individually. Today he went into the bubble for a little bit, did some work in there while the team is practicing outside. So definitely kind of a slower progression back to full team reps, a steady one. It is projecting like he's going to be the right tackle. And I've told you guys this from the beginning. He's the right tackle when he's healthy at the start of camp, right? Like that's the plan. The plan is, as we see it now, it's Andrew Thomas left tackle, Jermaine Illuminor left guard, John Michael Schmitz center, John Runyon Jr. right guard, and Evan Neal right tackle. And from there, that's going to depend on how Evan handles that, how he plays, how he goes through training camp, how he does in those joint practices. against the Lions and against the Jets. If that one happens and how he, whether he plays in those games, we will see. But Jermaine Illuminor is here because Carmen Bracillo trusts him implicitly. He also knows that he can play tackle. So I think the way the Giants view this, and I've told you guys this from the beginning, but it's definitely reinforced when we see it on the field, is their ideal scenario is for Evan Neal to play well at right tackle, and then Illuminor can help them on the interior. But they feel like they have a solution if Neal does not play well there to kick Illuminor out and be that right tackle. That's how I envision it happening if it comes to that. The thing I don't like, though, is like Illuminor working at left guard only to go over to right tackle. Like, I know he can do both, but that's not an easy switch, like on the run, right? Like, that's not an easy thing, even if you've done it before and played both positions, to go there like mid-camp or mid-season when you've been doing one the whole time. Like, it's not the same thing, but like, look at what Josh Azudu had to do last year, practicing at guard in this rotation. And then suddenly he gets kicked out to left tackle, protecting the blind side for a franchise quarterback who just got a new contract. Like, All right, we got a $5 super chat in here. Let's see. John Kirk, what's up, John? Good to see you again. He says, did you ask if the Giants are using or have plans to develop and use a virtual reality AI headset by the quarterbacks to help with play recognition? John, I forgot to ask about that. Hold on, writing it down right now so that I do not forget next time. Virtual reality AI headset. And John, you said that you saw who using that? Jaden Daniels, I think you had said, right? With the Washington Commanders was the team that you said that was using that, right? No, I did not. I know I haven't seen it, while I've been out there, but I will definitely ask that as well. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Who do we have next here? Tommy thinks that Darnay Holmes should be the slot corner. Well, they've worked him there, and we know he has played there. Darnay pretty much, it's interesting. If it's a run down, you want Darnay in the slot. If it's a passing down, you want Nick McLeod in the slot. Drew Phillips is the rookie who was drafted to hopefully be the mesh of the two, right? Like, that's how I view that. As far as how it's constructed in the way I'm looking at the depth chart right now, like, Drew Phillips, you hope, is the guy who can do both. He can tackle. He's tough. Can he defend against NFL caliber receivers right off the bat in the passing game in the slot? That's the question. Chronicle says, started to get concerned about Darren Waller's mental state and if he's okay, like his music video is concerning. Not to discourage creativity, but that song's a tough listen, man. And you're right. The music video is a little bit concerning as well. Definitely, you can tell he's trying to process a difficult time in his life. So don't want to judge too much, but certainly I think Darren is somebody who is trying to tap into ways to grow and push through whatever he's going through. But it definitely is not something that, from the Giants' perspective, you would think seems constructive to be tied to if this is the space he's in, right? But I just don't follow why. It's possible that returning to a locker room and to the NFL and to the routine of what he does as an NFL player could help him press a reset and come back refreshed, mind cleared, right? Those types of things. But it's also possible that based on where he is, he'll have trouble getting back into that and really focusing because he has things in his life that he's still processing that he has to get over and that they're more important to him. So, you don't know which way the person's going to go specifically and individually, but definitely, I mean, what an interminable story dragging out. And obviously the song not being received very well on social media, as I've seen. Yeah, Brett, I love how Bryce Ford Wheaton has looked so far. He looks healthy running out there. His big body has shown good hands from what I've seen so far. So I want to keep seeing him out there. I really do like what I've seen from number 6. Hunter says, do you think Danny Jones could be the runner he was before, or is he going to have to be a completely different guy because of the knee? Daniel said that he's going to be, fully himself by week 1. I do think, talking to medical experts, that straight line running at that point, he should be able to be himself. But as far as like planting your foot in the ground and cutting and changing direction, that's the question. Now, you don't have to do that as much as a running quarterback like Daniel, escaping the pocket, out, like just going forward, straight line out of the pocket, escaping up the middle. That's not something that you have to do as much of, like the planning and cutting and juking like a running back would have to do. So it's possible that it won't affect him too much come the regular season. But it is something to watch because we all know that that's a big part of his game. And even like going around the ends and planning and turning upfield, something to watch. But he does look encouragingly good out there on the field. There's no question about it. Tommy says they didn't draft a lineman because they wanted a proven O-line that has gone against NFL competition. Yeah, but you need to get guys into the pipeline. And you also, there are teams who draft offensive linemen who contribute in year 1. I mean, the Giants did it last year at center, right? Ryan Weber says, Ryan, what's up, man? Good to see you. He says, can we foresee a scenario where, depending on Evan Neal's health, the success of the season could depend on Jermaine Illuminor protecting Daniel Jones at right guard and somehow being the unlikely savior of the year, right tackle, right? So, yes, I mean, that's definitely like this went back to what they signed Illuminor for. Like, if you look at Jermaine Illuminor's contract, okay, calling it up just so I have it in front of me here. So the Giants signed Jermaine Illuminor to a, let's see, what has he got? 2 years. He's making 1.25 base salary this year, 5.75 next year, 4.7 cap number this year, 9.2 the next. Right. So it's 7 million APY. So $7 million a year for 2 years, a 2-year, $14 million deal that he has here with the Giants through 2025. And obviously that's not starter money, but that is a guy that you're putting on the field if you're paying him that as an offensive lineman in the NFL. Like, if you're paying a guy $7 million a year, he's playing for you. And so that's why, first of all, the best case scenario is number 7 overall pick of 2022, Evan Neal, playing well, because that's one thing Joe Schoen needs to happen for his drafting and his personnel selections and all that to look better and to start yielding results and to be the type of roster construction that you want to see. But Illuminor is here because of his versatility, his reliability, the way that offensive line coach trusts him, and the fact that they know that he can help them in multiple ways. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of moving a guy from the left side all the way to the right midseason, if that's your plan. But having, to Tommy's point, having someone who's done it in the NFL, had experience doing it, versus putting a rookie in cold. Obviously, you prefer that if you can do that, especially when it's a team that you need to go and show some more results right now. I am concerned, though, that they just haven't reinforced the depth behind these guys, and that they're counting on a select handful to A, stay healthy, and B, play at a high level, but also possibly have to switch positions like that, Ryan. But certainly, I guess you could say it this way, optimistically, having Illuminor to switch out of guard to tackle to help you out in a pinch this year is a better solution than you had last year. That's a fair way of saying it. Chronicles, he's talking to me. Pat, are we really picking apart an assistant GM press conference? I thought his answer was spot on. They added multiple free agents there, and there wasn't a moment in the draft where you thought it was clear to take an O-lineman. Oh, I disagree. I thought the second and third round, there were ample opportunities to take offensive linemen. Chronicle says starting O-line is looking good with quality backups behind them, plus still 53-man roster cuts and post-June 1 cut additions. Well, I just told you the defensive line is kind of has been dominating so far, but I like that you have optimism, Chronicles. He says, anytime the Giants have forced an offensive line pick in a round other than round 1, it's worked out horribly. So at least they didn't do that again. Develop the guys you've picked like Azudu and McKeithen. I don't have confidence in either of those guys. As much as they're nice guys, I don't have confidence in them being solutions. I don't agree with you that their depth is good. I do think that their center depth is better. Their center depth is better with Schlottman, Morrissey. I think they look better in that regard for sure. But guard depth, Aaron Stinney should help there. I think that's improved as well. They definitely attack the guard position. Concerned about tackle, concerned about, if Evan Neal doesn't work out. He's really a key to a lot of how this season could go, but it's not just on him. Tommy says the GM has made a learning decision from what was done in the past, drafting O-line. Only Thomas showing up, free agency O-line broad, proven in many vets at multiple positions, something this young talent needs. Rich says, I have gas, and if I film it, it will be way better than Darren Waller's video. Kyler says, who do you see having a surprisingly good year and one bad year? Great work, Pat. Thanks, Kyler. That's a good question. All right, let's check it out. So a surprisingly good year and one bad year. Okay. Surprisingly good year, I will say, at this moment, that's an interesting question. I'll go with, let's say, Theo Johnson. Okay. And now I don't want to, I want to pump the brakes on what I mean by surprisingly good. Like I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar or anything, but I do believe that Theo, as this roster is comprised, I think that he's going to play a lot, and I think that he's going to have opportunities to show what he can do. A guy like Chris Manhertz is a tight end who, like, he's not going to get a ton of targets. He's going to be there mainly for run blocking, but I do think he's going to be on the field a lot. He's going to help them in some of those ways. As far as a surprise, though, I mean, really, there aren't a lot of candidates to step up and become go from, we weren't expecting this guy to contribute to be an all-out baller for what they're trying to do here. Bryce Ford Wheaton right now looks to me like a sleeper who could pop. So I like Bryce Ford Wheaton. I like Theo Johnson, the tight end out of Penn State. Deonte Banks, I think, it's going to be hard for him having to handle the number one responsibilities every week. There's going to be plenty of weeks where no matter if he makes some good plays, like, they'll get the best of him as well. It's just the position. But Deonte Banks is a guy I have faith in as well. So I'll go with Deonte Banks, Bryce Ford Wheaton, and Theo Johnson. And then someone who's going to have a bad year. Well, I'm not going to say these guys are going to have bad years, but I think, listen, Cordell Flott, can he do that at outside corner? We will see. I mean, I think that position still screams for an addition on this roster. I think Flott is a guy who can help them being on the field, but trusting him to certainly be the answer as your outside corner. Can he do it? We will see. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying it's tough with what their schedule looks like, who they have to face, who they have to play. So that's a guy that I would watch. And then let's see. Bad year. I'm not saying he's going to have a bad year, but I think Dexter Lawrence is in a position now where, like, it's going to be hard without Leonard Williams here and with no clear kind of teammate on the interior. It's all on Dex now inside, right? Now they do have Brian Burns. They do have Kayvon Thibodeau, and they do have some depth guys working there. But I think that Dexter Lawrence, he's become a standout player. He's a great player. And he's really, like we talked about them losing Saquon and not having that guy on offense who commands attention every play. Like Dex is that guy on defense for sure, right? Dex is that guy. But is his play going to continue to ascend? Does he have more room to grow? Or is this going to be a frustrating season because new scheme, adjustments, maybe not as much help inside against the run? I'm not saying he's going to have a bad year. I mean, Dex is a great player. So, like, that's not what I'm saying. But as far as a player who might surprisingly have a more difficult time compared to what the expectations are, I think Dex on the interior is shouldering as big of a load as you can when it comes to an interior defensive lineman and the expectations of how he can change a game, right? So, like he was asked a question today about, hey, Aaron Donald's not in the league anymore. Do you think you can go get the title of best interior defensive lineman in the NFL? And, he definitely has the ability to do that, but I just think there's just so much expectation on that front, and specifically, led by him and Burns there, that it's going to be easy for there to be some games where people are expecting that D line to change the game, and they're not going to be able to do it every week. So that's not going to translate, in my opinion, into a bad season. But I'm just saying, expectations versus maybe what the reality will be compared to how the roster's constructed, that's a candidate. Also, like, I'm curious to see Jason Pinnock at safety. Like, will he ascend, or will he struggle without Xavier McKinney next to him? Or will he, continue to improve and ascend and kind of grab hold as far as like an on-field leader, a guy who can take charge, a guy who can make plays, continue to use as athleticism. We'll see. Hunter says, sign a corner or a safety. And if you are bad at trade deadline, trade them to a contender. Big Dash says, I finished off my old fashioned already, Pat. Got a few questions tonight, though. Let's go, Big Dash. Appreciate you. Brett says, do you think Justin Pugh comes back? We need some help. I think that could be something that honestly ends up happening, if it does happen, happening later, like just like it happened. I mean, last year it ended up happening like mid-season, right? This year, or not mid-season, but right at the start of the year, and then he ramped up and then came into the lineup when he was healthy. I think a lot of these players, like at Pugh's age and veteran level, some of these big names who are still out there, they're guys who, like, listen, you're going to trust me to stay in shape. I don't need to do, a full month of training camp. I'm not going to beat up my body left and right. It can't take it anymore, but I will come in and, show you that I'm healthy, I'm ready, I'm fit, and I'll come in a sufficient amount of time to get my body ready and be ready for the season. Maybe Justin Pugh's a guy who falls in on that. I do think, even though John Michael Schmitz did say today that he's concentrating on trying to step more into a leadership role, which is great to hear. And they do have guys like John Runyon Jr. To step up there as well. I think the offensive line, the offense, and the team would benefit again from having Justin Pugh back in the locker room. But, Pugh's already skyrocketing off to stardom in the media space here. A friend of the show on Talkin Ball as well. So we're happy for him whichever way he goes. But I do think the team would benefit from having him here. And I know the door is not completely closed on that, but we'll see where it goes. Big Dash says that Newbin draft day video was phenomenal. We'll have to check that out. Big Dash says, was Bellinger, Nacho, or Jordan Phillips there today? Daniel Bellinger was there. I'm not quite sure what the absence was about. Dable did not explain that. Nacho was there. Raheem Nunez-Roches on the interior. Jordan Phillips was not. Let's see. Big Dash says, I keep hearing DeVito looks sharp. How real is that? He looked sharp. He looked sharper in the indoor practice we saw last week. He struggled in this practice, Dash. And Nathan Rourke looked better in this one than DeVito did. So I'm sure, he probably goes back and forth in some of these practices, like day to day, right? Struggles happen. Like Drew Lock was better in this practice than he was in the OTA we saw previously. Wasn't great, didn't stand out, but was completing more passes, more productive. Did make a really nice throw to Wan'Dale Robinson on a long crossing route, getting some good protection from the offensive lineman and stepping up into the pocket. So, but yeah, Dash, I guess the best thing I could say about DeVito is the first practice, he completed a lot of passes, held the ball long, but completed a lot of passes. And then today's practice was holding the ball long and then was also off target frequently. So that's just the most recent update. RJ says, on Carmen Brasillo talking about Thomas changing, I'm certain it's about him varying his hands more and for more specific matchups too. His circle is great 95% of the time, but variance can make him even more dominant. Yeah, and I like that, and that's why tailoring your game and your game plan to specific opponents, like you have to have tenets and foundation, but you also do have to account for who you're facing, right? Whether it's the offensive coach and scheme you're facing or the specific player you're taking on, right? So I agree with that, RJ. And that's why, I do think game to game, right? Opponent to opponent, it requires more work, but it's worth it in the end. Kyler says, who do you see having a surprisingly good year and bad year? Also, who is playing opposite decks? Ryder, Riley, Chapman, or the other UDFA? It was a rotation today, so it was Nacho, it was Ryder Anderson, and Jordan Riley were all getting snaps there next to Dex. And we talked about the good and bad year. Big Dash says, is the zone blocking scheme confirmed? Well, Joel Thomas was talking about teaching the running backs about outside zone, and kind of really trying to reinforce that to them while showing them Tim Hightower clips, a running back who Thomas said ran the outside zone with perfect timing as far as how to mesh it with the offensive line and how they were moving, and so Dash, that I think that's probably a good clue there. Brett says, how is Elijah Chapman looking? His burst and power is what we need, even though he is smaller. Stronger than most D linemen and played a few snaps at fullback. Give him the ball. Baby Bison. Brett, seen him on the field. He does have some power to him. No standout snaps so far, though, that I've noticed, at least. Big Dash says, Jay-Sean Corbin is better than Dante Miller by far, but the new shiny toy will get the spotlight. Totally agree with you. I have been banging the drum for Corbin really because Big Dash, like, to me, I know we're in May now, but like when a guy shines in training camp or is outperforming teammates in training camp or in practices and in preseason games, like he deserves a chance to play. And when he doesn't, people raise their eyebrows. Like Eric Gray last year shouldn't have gotten carries at running back over Jay-Sean Corbin at any point, but we all know he's the draft pick, right? Like, that's just a good example. Big Dash says Saquon is no longer a Giant. Leave it at that. RJ says, with some guys more independent hand strikes, Tyron Smith-esque can help a lot. And there is a great video of Trent Williams talking about how to deal with Micah Parsons' approach would benefit Andrew Thomas. Did you see Micah Parsons wasn't at Cowboys OTAs and Mike McCarthy wasn't pleased about it? Uh-oh. Trouble in paradise down in Dallas. That's not good. That's not good for the Cowboys. Could be good for Big Blue, though, right? That's a team the Giants just can't beat, struggle to stay in those games. And this is honestly, you hear things sometimes about Dallas and about how things are a little bit too loose there, right? With like players being able to do whatever they want. And listen, this is something with Daboll too. Like, and this is with any program that runs like that. When you win, everybody loves you for that. Players love that, right? This and that. But when you lose, then you can't reel them back in. You can't get everybody to focus again and say, like, I know I was coaching you with, I know I was giving you a lot of freedom before, but now we're going to really like rein it in, and it's going to be more structured and more disciplined, and there's going to be stricter rules, and like you can't go from one to another like that. So does Dallas have a problem on its hands? That'll be interesting to see. Who do you guys think has a better chance to struggle this year if one of the teams falter? Dallas or Philly? Because we saw Philly really like kind of The bottom fell out down the stretch last year. And the Giants obviously have struggled with both of those teams. But, Dallas has a lot of talent. But, some signs like this, Dak, Micah Parsons, it's, something's off. And they didn't go all in like Jerry Jones said they were going to. Their running back room's not impressive, right? Zeke comes back as the guy. They didn't draft one. So, but then again, the Eagles, have their problems been solved? Have they addressed them with their defensive draft picks, with Saquon? Is Jalen Hurts going to bounce back? Curious which team you guys think could be the one that, like, let's say the Giants catch if they caught one this offseason or this season. Joey B, good to see you as always. A huge supporter of the show. RJ says running backs don't make that level of impact to double a receiver that consistently beats single coverage, other way around. I think you underestimate the amount of attention that defenses pay to guys like Saquon. Big Dash says, hit the damn like button, folks. 80 people in here. Do your job. That's right. That's right. And definitely, Big Dash, I'll say this. We get, when these New York teams do well, I totally understand if somebody is checking in and out of these live chats while they're watching the Rangers or watching the Knicks or watching their Mets or watching the Yankees, whatever it is. When there's a lot of winning going on in New York, it's good for everybody. But so I don't blame people if they're missing a live chat here and there for sure. It is May for the NFL, which ramps up come the fall. But, 80, 85 we have now. And, just really grateful to you guys for continuing these conversations throughout the offseason here as the Giants kind of continue to put their team together, and as they continue to evaluate. And like I said, it's really ramping up earlier with urgency for what the Giants know they have to accomplish this year to start turning this program around. Should have started earlier running it this way, but better late than never for sure. And as Big Dash said, you can support our channel in many ways. If you want your comment or question answered or addressed first or quicker or immediately, you can pay for a super chat or a super sticker. It elevates your comment to the top of the chat, and I get to it right away. If not, just hit that like button as we are live. That live engagement spreads the word to Giants and NFL fans out there that we are live and reminds them to come in and check us out. And we talk more than just Giants. If you have other NFL questions, please go ahead. I cover the whole league. It's not just the Giants, but I am the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. And so I am at the Giants for all these open practices and sessions and paying close attention to what's going on with the team and working those sources and working the phones as always. All right. RJ says the running game is more about blocking than anything. Resource allocation, and that is more important than a runner, even though they can be a cherry on top. Oh, RJ, yeah. I mean, listen, positional value, yeah, that's a thing. But that doesn't mean that running backs are like completely insignificant. I mean, you need to run the ball in the NFL to win unless you have a superhuman quarterback. But even that has limitations. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the league, best quarterback in the league. And he has essentially started to become a run first offense there, right? Based on their shortcomings at certain personnel and the way they've had to operate. And so that's a defense and run game led team with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Now, Josh Allen has been the guy who has kind of put it on his back. They started to run the ball now that Dable's not there anymore, but it's still a quarterback pass heavy offense. But James Cook has emerged as, quite a threat, right? So I totally agree with you on the positional value idea of running back theoretically compared to how you build a roster. But I'm just saying, you still need depth at that position. Another thing to help neighbors get single coverage will be motion at the snap. Also, they can move him inside with Slayton and Hyatt outside, Wandale backfield or slot. Yes. Skill positions are very versatile now on this offense. Yeah, for sure. One interesting thing, just wanted to note, Brandon Brown said today that Dable's offense is complicated in one of his answers. Drew Lock was also explaining how there's a lot to the offense. And so this is something we've heard about before, that I've reported before, we've talked about before. I just wanted to put a pin in it though, because it just seemed interesting. that it's coming up a lot. Um, the fact that, listen, you want to be unpredictable as an offense, but you don't want to overload, the team, the players, especially when there's a lot of transition. Like here's what Brown said. He said that what have you seen from he said it's a small sample size right now. So he's talking about Malik Neighbors. He said our offense is not easy to grasp. That's what he described it as. So he's describing it as like an offense that is not easy to grasp. And then later he was asked about Drew Lock and how he's done. So first he's talking about Malik Neighbors, and he said that he's doing well, even though the offense is not easy to grasp. And then later he said that they like what they see about Drew Lock. He has moxie and he has compete. And he said, I think with him getting adjusted to our scheme, obviously our offense is not simple. So he's got the whole full gambit of knowing what's different from what he's been exposed to. So that's two references from the assistant GM in 10 minutes about how complicated the offense is. And I just think that's interesting because especially with how poor the offense was last year, those are buzzwords that I think are important to hear especially if it comes from the front office like that, where, if they score 10 points a game in the first few weeks, like, is this going to be a thing about, listen, like there's kind of an overload of information here on the offense and how complicated it is. And maybe we need to simplify it. Right. And especially because it's all on Brian Daboll now, right? As far as being the play caller. And that's how it should be, when he's taking over plays. And that's how he wants it now because he feels like that's his strongest case to make for himself. Right. But, just something I wanted to mention that struck me when I was listening to Brandon Brown is two references and two different answers about two players about how complicated the offense is. Big Dash says Ford Wheaton is like the Hunger Games. The odds are not in his favor. I'll tell you though, if you watch it, listen, I don't want to build it up more than what it is, but he does, like, if you sit there and watch him on the practice field, he looks the part. Chronicles, I don't follow what you're saying here. Maybe you can explain. Yes, it was at LSU with Jaden Daniels with the headset. Got it. RJ says, as of now, I feel like they're going to have Ezeudu and Illuminor, one at guard, other at tackle, depending on Neal. Illuminor starts at right tackle. Ezeudu goes back to guard. Neal and then Ezeudu is swing tackle. Sucks for Ezeudu's development. Yeah, listen, I hope Josh Ezeudu becomes a good contributor and a good productive player. But you cannot count on him right now being a productive player. If he becomes that, that's exciting. And so clearly they're working on that. But as far as just, planting your flag and saying he's a part of our strong depth, you can't say that yet. You have to see it happen in games. Let's see. Joe says, ahoy, Pat. What do you think of Drew Brees potentially unretiring? What did I see? He was getting inducted in the New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame, wasn't it? Let's see. Potentially unretiring. I would love to broadcast NFL games at some point again. I think I could be the best at it, he said. I did not hear that he was potentially unretiring, Joe. I know that at the end of Drew Brees' career, it just looked like he couldn't throw the ball anymore. So that would shock me. I don't think that's a thing. Though maybe he made a joke about it during his speech when the Saints kind of retired his number there. Chronicle says, believe it or not, John, in some instances, the colleges have more technology than the NFL. Yeah, that's true. Christian says, Pat, thanks for your insight on all these things. Really enjoy the chats. Thanks for being here, Christian. Thanks for saying that. Big Dash says, Darnay is a linebacker and a cornerback's body. There might be some truth to that. RJ says the Giants traded Tony to get the tight end Tony. Derek says, thoughts on Dante Miller getting playing time at running back? Derek, Dante Miller has some, like you call a guy like a scat back, that's like what he reminds me of, like a guy who's the runner who looks like he's running like an absolute maniac all the time. Oh, I'm drawing a complete blank. Who is the oh, come on. Who is the NFL running back who always runs like he was like shot out of a cannon, like fighting for his last meal? That's kind of how Miller runs, like fast, high legs. Looks like he's moving, almost faster than, like, even if he's not running fast, he looks like he's moving fast, if that makes sense. But he's undersized. They are an undersized running back room. So he looks to me like a guy who's here to develop. Yeah, Pacheco. That's right. Thanks, RJ. Pacheco. Yeah, I don't know why that was eluding me there. Oh, JJan checking in with a super sticker. Thank you, JJan. $2. JJan says, you demand, can Neighbors and Slayton be a solid 1-2? Yeah, I think Jalen Hyatt, you really do need Jalen Hyatt to take another step for this receiving core to be what it needs to be for the Giants this year, in addition to the two guys you just mentioned playing and producing. Because we know Wandale's a guy who, can do catch and run. You can use him in motion. You can make him, he's a versatile player, but he's more underneath. And, Slayton crossing routes, knows the offense, has, chemistry with Daniel Jones. And then Neighbors can be that explosive element. If Hyatt, though, can be like take the top off the defense and also add some more into his repertoire, be a legitimate run blocker, be able to add more to his route tree, right? Like, you don't want to see games where he's running 60 routes and getting 2 targets and, not open, right? You want to see him able to run the full offense and be a threat. And with that speed, like if they can unlock Jalen Hyatt along with Neighbors kind of, fulfilling his promise and Slayton being the same steady guy, now you have something, Chronicles says that I think he's talking about Darren Waller not being a rapper. Yes, we definitely know that. Brett thinks Darren Waller comes back to take his mind off of things in the end. Plus, the Giants' receivers are dangerous. Finally, Antonio, good to see you. Did Gunnar Olszewski's injury look serious? What concerned me, Antonio, was he got up and limped off the field, and then as he sat down, he immediately took off his left shoe, and he kind of he took his gloves off and maybe some tape, and he like threw it on the ground, like he was really pissed off. So you never want to see that. He looked upset, and then he actually stood up again and tried to walk it off and was limping, got about 10 yards maybe, and then just sat right back down. It was just, looked dejected and disappointed, ended up going in with the training staff. So I hope it's not serious. Maybe it's just a sprain that's going to cost him some time in practice, like that you hope for it, something like that. But we'll see. I mean, it was really just like running. He and another receiver were running like comeback routes apart from each other, like not near each other. And he put his foot in the ground and kind of slipped. But I think he was putting his right foot in the ground, but just slipped down and kind of bent down awkwardly on his left foot and ankle. He actually caught the pass still, like kind of came up like almost doing an army crawl and caught the pass. But, it wasn't a good sight there. Derek says, no need for Darren Waller. We have Theo Johnson. Rather get that money and spend on possibly bringing back Adoree. Okay. Antonio says, I was just curious, what are you hearing about the Giants' thought process by putting Illuminor at left guard at a position where he's never started a game, and even though he does have a few starts at right guard? We haven't gotten a clear answer yet, Antonio, to why. Like, we've asked about that, but we haven't gotten a clear answer yet. Excuse me. Sorry. Just picking up another agua. To why, you have Runyon saying, you have those facts with Illuminor, and you have Runyon saying he prefers the left, and yet those guys are flip-flopped. I think it's because like Runyon he was their top offensive line signing, the guy that they prioritized. And I think they really want Evan Neal. I know they really want Evan Neal and need Evan Neal to work as a right tackle for their team, their offense, and their offensive line to function at their optimal level. Like that's the best case scenario. And so I think it has something to do with Runyon Jr. being next to Evan and helping him anchor that side down. Not that Illuminor couldn't do it either, but clearly they have a lot of faith in Runyon as a guy who can help Evan Neal grow and help that side of the line. I do think, Antonio, that my best answer to that is Runyon's presence next to Neal is a factor there. Hey, Jacob, good to see you. Doesn't matter if you jumped in at the beginning or midway, all good. He says, smash that like button and sub button for the real G, Pat. Always appreciate you, Jacob. RJ says, Azudu is a big surprise candidate if he actually got time to practice and start at guard. We will see. Surprisingly, let's see. Tommy says he thinks surprisingly good players will include Tracy, Phillips, Theo, Ovi, Johnson, Rogers, and Ottman Bell. Listen, if you hit on that many undrafted rookies and guys on the fringe of your roster, then you end up being a good team. That's for sure. Big Dash says, what's the tight end depth chart right now with Bellinger, without Bellinger in attendance? Well, Bellinger was here at this practice, but really, Big Dash, like the guys that you see most consistently getting the first team snaps are with Bellinger in attendance. So Chris Manhertz plays a lot with the ones, especially when they're two tight end sets, right? But Theo Johnson gets plenty of first team reps. We saw Bellinger get some in this practice. Jack Stoll sprinkled in here and there. But I personally think that if the season started, well, not today because Theo Johnson's still learning the offense and all, but I think the Theo Johnson, Chris Manhertz, Jack Stoll, and then Daniel Bellinger kind of maybe alongside Stoll or just behind him, maybe depending on that. That looks a lot like what I think it'll end up looking like profiling from right now. RJ says Aziz is a big surprise candidate too in a DPR role, helping him stay healthy. Yeah, that's for sure. That's true. Ryan says, is Ayer Asante worth getting excited about? Any other UDFAs we should pay attention to? Ryan, Asante looks really good as a receiver. As a punt returner, they were working him today. Don't think he can do it. At least watching him back there, I don't think that's the path to go. But Asante does catch my eye at every practice as a receiver. So I view Asante as a guy who is an encouraging developmental player. You put him on the practice squad, and then, you see what he continues to do in practice. And then maybe you work him in if injuries call for more bodies up and things of that nature. That is definitely a guy as a UDFA who has stood out to me. We talked about Alex Johnson as a second team corner. So clearly earning an opportunity there. Those are the undrafted rookie free agents that so far have stood out as far as what they've earned on the depth chart and some plays they've made. No one else that you've mentioned there jumped off the page to me so far. Yes, Nacho was there. Bellinger was there as well today here on May 30th. Tommy thinks that Phillips, Rogers, or Elijah next to Dex will be a problem for other teams. Let's see. Celtics, Mavs in the finals. All right, Hunter. Appreciate you. Tommy says McLeod, Pinnock, Belton, Holmes will make plays this season. Okay. Antonio says, have you seen Nacho and Jordan Phillips at OTAs? Nacho was there. Jordan Phillips was not. Dable said that Jordan Phillips has been he said Darren Waller is the only guy who hasn't been there for at least one day. So that implies that Jordan Phillips has been there, but we haven't seen him in either of the open practices. Brett says, if God forbid we lost Andrew Thomas and Neil had his pick of left or right tackle, would he pick the left? That's why I believe he may be thinking about moving to left guard on his own, better on the left. Justin Pugh was the one who said that he felt like that's the move that they should make. No indication at the moment that that is something that they would intend to do, especially because when we see him standing with the offensive line in, the positional offensive line drills, like just working as the line together off to the side, he is lined up at right tackle. He's just not playing live reps right now. But like Justin Pugh is the one who kept saying to me, like from his own experience, he said, they start me at right tackle in the NFL. I wasn't ready for it. And then finally I get moved over to left guard and I start to settle down and become the player that I feel like I could be. But he felt like, just get it done. Like, don't delay what could be the inevitable if it helps the player develop and helps your team as well, right? Antonio says, is the door still open for the Giants to re-sign Tyree Phillips as the swing tackle? I think it should be. Definitely a player coming off an injury who it would be worth it, more than worth it for them to continue to check in on and see if that's a match. They did bring in Matt Nelson, who has been working through something off to the side as well. But they do need, in my opinion, another swing tackle. Simeon asks, tongue in cheek, it seems, was Waller in the building today passing out autographed copies of his CD? Not sure who would accept it if it was about the song he just released. Did anyone talk to Kafka and Shea Tierney today? Antonio says. Shea Tierney was available, talked to some people. Kafka was not because he's a coordinator, so the coordinators will be available at minicamp. So at minicamp, we'll talk to Kafka, Bowen, and Gabriel. Antonio wants to know the next open media OTA practice. That is a week from today. So we are here on Thursday, May 30th. So next Thursday, we will be at Giants OTAs again. RJ says, same with hard-ass programs, winning and losing. Judge is an example. Common denominator is winning and losing. Right, winning and losing. Wins is all that matters, as Darius Slayton said. Tommy thinks the Cowboys are going to be the team that burns down this year between them and the Eagles. Christian says Dallas is banking on them playing for a contract and hoping for a ring, referring to some of their top players in Dak and Parsons. Justin said, I could see Dallas falling off before the Eagles. CeeDee Lamb could also be a holdout for a new deal. Yeah, really interesting times down there in Texas. Joe says QB fumble rate all time. Average QB has 0.6 fumbles per start. Daniel Jones averaging 0.97 per start, which is bottom 20% all time. Yeah, no doubt, Joe. Joe, I'd be curious to see, not that it shouldn't not count, not that it shouldn't count, but I wonder if you take out his rookie year, what it is. Because the rookie year, but then again, the rookie year, he actually produced more points too. So I guess that's not a really fair thing to say. But that is definitely one that heavily affects that. Antonio says Calais Campbell next to Dexter Lawrence on a one-year deal would be so good. You would think we want to go to contender at this point in his career, but he did play for the Falcons last year, who went 7-10. Yeah, the Falcons have more talent, and they also play indoors. That's also, but no, that's a fair point. I mean, it's not like they were a team that was supposed to be great last year. So, that's something to think about. Christian says, I won't believe the Giants have caught up to Dallas or Philly until they show it. Sick of getting just 2 to 3 wins in the division. Christian, I'm right there with you. Show me first. Micah Parsons is a Jones fan. Giants need him, says Brett. Interesting. Tommy says, let Hyatt, Slayton, Neighbors take turns flying downfield after running it heavy 12 and 13 personnel. Slip Theo Johnson down the seam, Bellinger after a block and release. Tommy's got it figured out. Let's see. Brett says, Pat, you cover the Giants, right? But are they your favorite team? Probably a dumb question. Just don't say it's Philly and we're good. Brett, I don't have a favorite NFL team. Like I'm not allowed to, and I don't. Like I root for people. So like, when I covered hockey, when I cover football, whatever, like you get to meet a lot of players, a lot of coaches, a lot of general managers or whatever. And you just meet some people who are really good people. And, because I don't have the luxury to root for a team, I choose to do it that way. So in other words, like if I'm watching, I don't know, let me pick a team here who has some guys on it that I know. Well, let's just hypothetically say Darius Slayton next year signs with, the Bears or whatever. I would watch the game, watch a Bears game and be like quietly pulling for Darius to play well because I like him and I've gotten along well with him and I have a good relationship with him. And I'm grateful for how he's helped the media and how honest he's been and stand up guy and, all that. And so I would pull for him to do well. And there's guys on the current Giant team that I feel that way about, too. Like when I watch the Giants. And, there's guys all over the league that I feel that way about. So, I hope that answers your question. I mean, you can't do my job objectively if you pull for any team. Like you just can't. I mean, it's not a genuine way for me to portray my insight and knowledge and insight to you guys if I'm doing it with the bias of hoping one team fails and another succeeds. Like that's, there's different roles in the football and NFL media. So different people can handle those things different ways. But the way working at a newspaper, covering a team, trying to maintain objectivity, you can't root for teams. Antonio says, do you think Isaiah McKenzie makes the team as a backup slot receiver and starting punt returner? Possibly. I saw a couple punt return reps I didn't like from him, catch it with the body today, but I know he's got some juice. So he can do that. He was doing a lot of work on the side today. Like he was the receiver on the side that Daniel Jones was throwing to while the rest of the team was going through practice in 11 on 11. So maybe he's working through something there. But yeah, no, he has a chance. That's why he's here to compete. And with Gunner getting hurt, hopefully that's not too serious. But obviously, Gunner and McKenzie are two guys seemingly kind of working after the same thing. Joe says, Pat, do you think this regime will last if they lose round one playoffs? Yes, Joe. I think if the Giants get back to the playoffs this year, then no question about it, this GM and coach will be here. Mel, it's good to see you. Big Dash says, don't get me wrong, Pat. I like Ford Wheaton. I just don't like his odds. How many receivers make the roster? 7 at max. He has to make it as a special teamer. Yeah, he does have to do that, Big Dash. But Ford Wheaton also could be the kind of player that you throw down into the practice squad too, and then like bump him back up. Also, just don't discount Brian Daboll keeping more receivers than you think, even if you have a number that's high in your mind. This is an offensive head coach, right? So don't forget that. Joe says, actually, the Drew Brees headline was he seriously considered unretiring in 2021. I missed the 2021 part. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes more sense. Blocking is the most complicated, Brett says, in reference to, establishing a running game for sure. Tommy says, Dash, for sure, hope they keep Ayer, Giles, Altman, Bell around to see what turns out in the receiver room. Yeah, they do have some developmental talent there. Yep. Yeah, Big Dash echoes what I said. Regime is safe if they make the playoffs. They don't even have to win. Yeah, right. Exactly. For sure. I mean, listen, making the playoffs with this roster and with a schedule that does not look easy, right? Like that would, because listen, the only fair way to talk about this is, year one, they went to the playoffs and won a playoff game. Year two was a disaster. Year three now is a chance for them to show us which one was the anomaly and which one is who they really are, right? That is like the most brass tacks version of approaching the 2024 season that I think is fair and accurate. There's obviously more layers to that. Like I personally thought that outside of the playoff win in Minnesota and the Indianapolis game late in the first season, that we saw who they really were down the stretch of that year. But you have to give them credit for what they did with that team, right? How the defense helped them, how Dable kind of ran the games and the game plans to help the team stay in games and win with that roster, despite the fact that they really had no designs on winning, right? Because they didn't think they were going to be able to with what they had. So, um, I think if they have success this year, then great. Like that's, you don't want to turn things over all the time. I mean, it's not what the Giants want to do, right? They've done it too often now. They don't want to keep doing it. So, um, you know, getting back on the winning track there would be no reason to make major changes. Tommy says, absolutely. Runyon, Illuminor next to Thomas, Neal, and JMS will pan out better for sure. Oh, the Rangers lost at the Garden. Unfortunate, but they have been outplayed lately, other than the man Igor himself. So that's sad to see. Thanks for the live stream, Pat. Talk to you on the next one, says Justin. Thank you, Justin. Big Dash says, I definitely think the Eagles fall off before the Cowboys. Joe says, how does Hodgins fit into the picture? As a red zone threat, obviously a veteran who knows the offense as well. So he has that leg up there. Could be the way that he makes the roster over others. Still surprised me, though, Joe, that he re-signed in the first place. I didn't think that there was a place for him on this team, especially because, they really phased him out in a lot of ways last year at times down the stretch of the season. So I was surprised that he re-signed. Big Dash said 3 wins in the division is good, in my opinion, especially if the division is good. If they can, Big Dash, I agree that if you can hold serve in the division, like at least you can take a breath and say, okay, it gave us a chance, right? At a 500 season, right? Based on the rest of the schedule. Or, to get to that, right? But if you start talking about 0, 1, and 2 division win seasons, that's how you end up like bottom of the NFL barrel, right? Typically that's one of the breakdowns, right? It doesn't always work out that way. But certainly also, like, to me, Big Dash, I think you agree, like in division, it's not just about wins and losses. It's about, well, first of all, like when you're playing the Eagles and Cowboys, it's like almost never winning, but also just getting blown out and embarrassed. Like the way those Cowboys games went, have gone in the recent past, right? Like they just have to be games where you hold, you walk out of there believing the next time you play them that you can win, because you just went toe to toe with them and you kind of, you played a respectable, disciplined game. You scored points. There wasn't an area of your roster that was a glaring weakness in the matchup, right? Like you need to get to that point at least. Antonio says, is signing a veteran running back out of the question like Kareem Hunt? I don't think so. It'd have to be on the cheap. Kareem Hunt's domestic violence history, even though I believe it's pretty distant in the past now, I'm not quite sure that would be a thing that John Mara would go for at this stage after, all the Josh Brown stuff. But, I don't know. I can't speak for the Giants on that one, but yeah. Tommy says the Cowboys lost Zimmer, won't get that defensive unit back to all the turnovers. Oh, they lost their defensive coordinator in Dan Quinn, and Zimmer won't get that defensive unit back to all the turnovers. Yeah, it's interesting. Experienced coach, but they lost the guy who had them playing a certain way the last few years, for sure. Tommy says the Rangers down 3-1 doesn't look good. They are, let's see. Well, they're down 3-2 in the series now. So the Rangers go to game 6. They lose the game 3-2, and now they're down 3-2 in the series. Mel says Giants rule. RJ says, I would argue rooting for people can take objectivity out of it still too. Well, no, I don't mean like rooting against guys and for others. That's not what I mean. I just mean like feeling good about their success, like, pulling for them type thing. Like, I don't mean like rooting for them and therefore it affecting the way. I hope that makes sense. Big Dash said, did Daniel Jones take any shots downfield today? He was pushing the ball pretty well up the field, like, doing just the one-on-one throwing with Isaiah McKenzie. So that was good to see. In the 7-on-7, I think he threw he threw a nice crossing route pretty far down the field, maybe like 20 yards down the field to Darius Slayton. But no shots. No shots. Robert agrees that going 3-3 in division is a win. Brett says, right on, Pat. Thanks. DJ is the man. And Tommy says, Dash, we need Jones ready to let it air out. Like Burrows said, he knows he has his receivers out there. Let it rip. Yeah, you got to get to that. And that's all the pieces working: the play calling, the offense, the offensive line, the quarterback, the receivers. This has been a great chat, guys. Remember, we are sponsored by Bet Online and by Estate 98 Coffee, an Essencia Day Cafe from El Salvador, dates back to 1798. Also by Future Fans Football. Go check it out, futurefans.com. A nice Father's Day gift if you want to teach your kids about the game we know and love. Remember, you can purchase a super chat or super sticker when you're in here, or just hit the like button while we're doing it. It's a great way to increase engagement and tell people we are live. We do these Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, unless I tell you otherwise, like on Memorial Day on a holiday. But right now we're rolling. We have a great episode of the podcast dropping tomorrow, Friday the 31st. Leonard Marshall, the Giants legend, special guest, will be coming on the program to talk about fellow LSU product, Malik Neighbors, about potentially getting in the Hall of Fame one day, about the 1986 and 1990 Giants, and about the current NFL, the reason why he and his team were so successful, telling us stories from back in the day and the Bill Parcells days, and on and on. It's a great interview. Loved talking to him, and it's something that I think you guys should really check out and will enjoy. Bill says, thanks for the show, Pat. Love these things. Tommy says, health and wealth to all. Intel says, mad respect, Pat. Big Dash says, great, Joe, Pat. And Joe asked me, what do I think about the comments Carl Banks made, the one where he ended by saying fan on? Did not hear those, Joe. Did not hear those comments by Carl. But like I said, Leonard Marshall on the podcast. Check it out. May 31st, dropping on the YouTube channel at PL on NFL. You can follow me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, at PL on NFL, and on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I'm at P Leonard NYDN. Bill says, I bought those books, Pat, the Giants and tight end ones. Oh, great, Bill. Hope you enjoyed it. OG says, thanks, Pat. D-Kit, all good that you missed it. Don't worry about it. We will see you on the next one. Checking out now, Talkin Ball Live. This is Pat Leonard signing off. D-Kit, if you have a question, drop it in the comments on the YouTube channel, and I will answer it there. No worries. Take care. Thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for being here, Giants and NFL fans. We will talk to you next time.